This is the aftermath of the raid in July 1988. 11 armed officers forced their way into this Mayfield house after receiving anonymous information that escapee Raymond Denning was inside. The information proved to be incorrect. 50-year-old Dravka Javanovski was working in her back garden. Through a Macedonian interpreter, she told Newcastle Court today how she heard the door banging and went to investigate. She found the front door had been forced open and several police were in the house. She told how one officer came towards her and pointed a rifle at her face. "I got a big fright. I thought that he would kill me. I raised my arms and surrendered." She said it was between 5 and 10 minutes that she stood there with her arms in the air, the gun pointed at her. At issue here is whether the police lawfully entered the Mayfield house and whether their actions have had any subsequent effect on Mrs. Javanovski. It's claimed she now suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Her counsel Trevor Boyd said the police had no right to be in her home and certainly had no right to point a big rifle at her. He quoted her psychiatrist who said the trauma she'd gone through was extremely severe and was in fact more stressful than that experienced during a time of war. The hearing continues tomorrow.
For any parent whose child has suffered burns, the anguish at bath time is not easily forgotten. So today there was cause for celebration at the John Hunter Children's Hospital as staff and patients welcomed the hospital's latest acquisition, a new $30,000 custom-designed bath.
Well, what we hope is that we will not only be able to make the bathing a less unpleasant experience, because it is unpleasant at the moment, but also mean that the children will heal faster and get out of hospital quicker.
The American-made bath is the first of its kind to be imported into Australia. Through ultrasound waves in the bath water, it loosens bandages from healing wounds and new skin. The brightly coloured mural is designed to distract the children, an important part of pain therapy. There's also plans for a music system to be installed.
It's taken us a little while, but with all the assistance of our sponsors, we finally reached our dream, and today is a great day.
Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
The first semi slid out of control around a bend north of Karua at about 2:30 this morning, jackknifing and tipping over onto its side. It skidded for about 80 metres before plunging over an embankment on the wrong side of the road, eventually stopped by trees. Amazingly, the driver received only minor injuries and no other vehicles were involved. Then later in the morning, another truck came to grief at Bulahdelah, losing a load of glass. It's believed the glass was thrown from the vehicle when a mounting holding it down came loose. Police had to stop traffic while the glass was cleared. No one was injured.
The students gathered in a picturesque natural amphitheatre near the Shortland wetlands this morning to hear from some of Australia's leading designers and architects. They've been camping in the area the past week, leaving the lecture theatres to gain a more practical understanding of the natural environment. It's hoped the experience will encourage them to design more environmentally friendly buildings.
We just feel that architects aren't really getting in touch with the site enough and with the land, and we're designing these monstrosities which just get thrown onto the ground, and this is all about living on the land and dealing with the elements and hearing what's around us.
They also learnt a little more about Australia's heritage and received some useful tips on how to play the didgeridoo. Emma Ossian, NBN News. It doesn't look much at the moment, but this old house is soon to be the centrepiece of the Hunter Valley's newest vineyard. A winemaker with 25 years' experience, Murray Robson is the man behind the project, having recently bought just over 4 hectares of farmland at Pecolban. Mr Robson plans building an underground winery, then using cranes, placing the old building on top of it, providing the public with something a little different.
This will be fairly unique because there aren't very many old buildings that are real, that can be used for this purpose, and we thought to have the winery underneath, it would look good.
Mr Robson hopes to have the winery up and running by the end of the year. Today he was joined by Cessnock Mayor Merv Pine for the first turning of the sod.
It'll be another unique addition. It'll be different and gives the tourism industry a wider space to look at.
Mr Robson warns the small vineyard won't provide large quantities of wine, but says it will produce a high quality drop. Emma Siossian, NBN News.
You don't want the snake update, do you?
Put down your occupation as a stripper. Don't. Yep, that's fine. It shows you.
How he's going? How he's going? Good.
Tax and Commonwealth Employment Service workers picketed offices in the city and suburbs today, many fearing they could be out on the street permanently after the August budget.
Well, in Newcastle and the Hunter, they've already announced cuts, the closure of the Belmont CES, the closure of the Immigration Office, which provides a very valuable service to industry and research in the area.
The Customs Service will be halved, leaving just a dozen officers to patrol Newcastle's increasingly busy port. Members of the CPSU claim the closure of the Immigration Office will affect the region's big industries, including health and education, by slowing visa applications for skilled workers.
Are the cuts being directed at what many of us perceive to be the fat cats in the public sector?
No, what they're directed at, as we can see by the closures in Newcastle, are the frontline services. We're taking out people who deliver real services to the community. And we're not talking welfare here, we're talking government services which people are entitled to receive.
It's alleged 24-year-old Robert James Bickmore from Punchbowl and his 21-year-old fiancée travelled to Pindima yesterday, breaking into a number of properties before being caught out by a neighbour.
They were disturbed by a local resident who'd come up to go to his holiday house, and he disturbed them at their next-door neighbour's house attempting to break in. Now, he confronted them and followed them while the wife has provided information to police over the phone that later led to a search and the arrest of the offenders.
Bickmore appeared in Raymond Terrace local court today on 25 charges relating to break, enter and steal, drug matters and driving while disqualified. He was refused bail and is due to reappear in court on August 19th. His fiancée, who faces 23 similar charges, is due to appear in court on the same day. The police this afternoon travelled to Pindima to recover a stolen weapon which had been hidden in bushland. They've praised the local residents for their help with the investigations, saying it's a good example of how the police and community can work together.
This is the process we look at where the community acts in conjunction with the police to try and help them to stop crime. It certainly worked yesterday with the vigilance of local residents.
Emma Siossian, NBN News.
Main Road 217 between Morisset and Wallsend is under increasing load as the major West Lakes arterial road. A focal point for the future planning is the Toronto deviation, controversial because on paper it runs through a wetlands area and houses.
The deviation at Toronto resulted in council putting together a task force in 1993. Discussions in that task force showed that there was greater concerns along the whole length of the road rather than that particular issue.
A consultant's report on improving the road suggests $45 million would be needed over the next 10 years to carry out work from guardrails to a duplicate bridge across Fennell Bay and dual carriageway to Booragul from Toronto. The state government has yet to commit any funding to such projects. The study goes on show from tomorrow.
Obviously, there are very controversial issues in a number of sections of the plan. These will be further tested in environmental impact statements as the works get close to be done, and those will involve public consultation and testing of various options.
Jack Martin was last seen packing his truck for a trip to the mountains almost 2 weeks ago. He's believed to have set off for Moonin Flat near Scone with his cattle dog Bluey in a white 1984 Toyota 4Runner. Mr Martin is familiar with the area and was equipped for a week's camping, but family members became concerned when he failed to meet up with his brother on Sunday the 14th of July.
We're concentrating on now is just to get as much coverage as possible in the hope that somebody spotted him or the car over the last 2 weeks.
Scone police have carried out extensive searches of the area but have found no trace of Mr Martin. Adding to the safety concerns, Mr Martin has displayed recent episodes of short-term memory loss.
Yeah, he's had a few lapses of memory recently. That's probably due to a minor stroke that he had about 3 or 4 months ago. So we've noticed a slight deterioration there, but I wouldn't go as far to say that he's completely forgotten who he was or where he was supposed to be.
Anyone with information is asked to contact Scone Police. Andrew Lobb, NBN News. The overdoses have come when children help themselves to medicines such as paracetamol used to lower temperatures and fevers. The syrups are often sweet, the bottles with so-called child-safe lids irresistible to toddlers.
In the last 5 or 6 weeks we've had about 5 children in John Hunter Hospital overdosing on paracetamols, which are the temperature lowering medication that's usually given to children, and that's a really worrying figure.
Potentially fatal poisoning can occur if a child ingests too much medicine. Strict directions and warnings accompany the labels. Half the battle, though, is to keep the medicine out of reach in locked cupboards and lids firmly screwed on.
It must go in a locked cupboard, or if it has to be refrigerated, disguise it in some way so that it goes in its original container but into another container in the refrigerator so that when they open the door they don't instantly recognise it as medication.
Mark Jackson was one of 5 men in this car which crashed in the early hours of the morning at Holmesville in January 1993. His friend Mark Tomlinson was killed. The men had been drinking and had had little sleep. Mr Jackson, who was a backseat passenger, was flown to hospital. He suffered a serious head injury, fractured numerous vertebrae and injured his shoulder. 3 years on, Mark Jackson is deaf in one ear, has double vision in one eye and suffers back pain and memory loss. He was today awarded $218,000 in damages, the judge saying his ability to lead a normal life had been significantly impaired. Mark, how did you feel about the decision?
I'm just glad it's all over and I can get on with my life now.
Judge Margaret Sidis made a finding of contributory negligence against Mark Jackson, reducing his damages by 25%. She found he was a voluntary passenger in the car and ought to have been aware that the driver was intoxicated. What she couldn't determine, however, was the amount of money Mr. Jackson may have earned from playing football. Before the crash, rugby league was the focus of his life. He was a talented halfback who played for Toronto. He'd also been invited to try out for a Sydney team, but at 20, his football career came to an end.
Cronulla Sutherland invited him to trial with their under-21 squad, and that was shortly before the accident, so I suppose we'll never know.
After 2.5 years' work, Maitland has its new hospital wing. The city's $31 million extension's officially opened by Health Minister Andrew Refshorgi.
I think probably almost 10 years we've had promises for the Hunter and no delivery. I'm saying the promises are over, it's time for the delivery. We need to make sure that that money comes and it comes as fast as possible.
The new facilities have been used since April, including nearly 100 more beds in the new medical, surgical and coronary wards. They'll also serve as a legacy to Executive Officer Ron Pickett, who retires next month after 40 years at the hospital. The Minister used the extensions as a platform to sell his government's reallocation of health resources. The Hunter received an additional $5 million this year and can expect more in the future.
But there is an expectation of at least double that amount of money will be coming to the Hunter to provide equity.
The Minister was less forthcoming on the government's preferred tender for Hunter Health's rescue helicopter service.
We have a tender process at the moment. It's highly improper for a minister to interfere with a tender process. That would be seen as corrupt practice, and I'm sure even you wouldn't like me to do that.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Trip over your bloody tripod, Richard.
I think about 2 o'clock in the bloody morning.
That's true, that's the point.
Might be bloody different.
Storm Boy paid $7.50 and $2.70, Diamond Walk paid $2.90 and another Dame $4.50, the Quinella $25.40 and the Trifecta $662.60. Now to the coast and race 6 at Port Macquarie. The placings 5, 1 and 2, the Quinella paid $30.20 and the Trifecta $368.30.
One of the bravest sports people you could meet is a cyclist called Troy Newman, who suffers from Hodgkin's lymphoma or cancer of the lymph. Troy and his legally blind and multiply disabled brother Craig use their fitness and skill not for their own glory, but to help others. Earlier in the year, they rode from Queensland to their home in Newcastle to raise money for the Westpac rescue helicopter. Today, they cycled from Sydney to Newcastle to help Canteen, a support group for teenagers with cancer. And the gold and silver they've won through their sport is truly of the most valuable kind, adding up to thousands of dollars to help those who need it most. Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
It was a shocking experience for the three pensioners. Bandits broke through the front door of their home in Windale in southern Newcastle at around 1 this morning. Three young men carrying a baseball bat, a machete and a shortened firearm dragged one man out of his bed and with a gun at his head, they demanded drugs.
As I said, look, the only pensioners here, only drugs we get is what we get off the doctor and through the chemist.
The men had raided the wrong house. One of the pensioners has recently suffered a heart attack, another has a brain tumour. None of them could believe what was going on.
So I was just petrified.
After ransacking the house and cutting the phone line, the bandits escaped with a video recorder and $150 that one of the 60-year-old residents had won at Housey. This is the third attack of this type in the suburb in the last month. Peter Ryan, NBN News. Ivan Milat visited his relatives and worked in the Newcastle region in the late 1970s. It was 1979 when 18-year-old Robin Hickey went missing, last seen at a bus stop beside the Pacific Highway at Belmont. 3 other unsolved cases from that period have also been targeted by the police task force, but they have no definite leads.
At this stage, there really isn't anything definite or concrete that we can say was connected with the other missing people cases.
While Milat is tonight in Maitland Jail serving a life sentence, police are still getting information from people who believe they may have something to add to the murder inquiries.
Some people in the community have been ringing with various snippets of information or suggestions or concerns, etc. So obviously these are things we've got to look at.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Beth Lean's 20-year-old daughter, Leanne Goodall, disappeared in 1978 from a Muswellbrook railway station and hasn't been seen since. There are no clues, no leads. She simply vanished. In 17 years, her mother hasn't stopped hoping or worrying.
You sort of have your crazy days, I guess you call them, where you have your cries, and I even talked to Leanne. I sort of let her know family happenings.
To help others like Beth, Missing Persons Week gives people who have intentionally disappeared the opportunity to call home. They can do so without disclosing their whereabouts by calling a toll-free number. Organiser Sean Lamerton says missing people need to realise what their families suffer.
We deal with relatives regularly and we know that they go from bad day to worse. I'm sure, I hope that these sort of people have no idea of the heartbreak they're putting their family through.
With 6,000 people going missing each year and 100 remaining missing long term, Operation Safe and Well is a huge undertaking. It begins next week. People wanting to give information to their families or loved ones can phone 1800 025 091. Laura Saperstein, NBN News. One thing most senior citizens have is free time to do things like this, see concerts, go shopping and enjoy the finer things in life. But up until now, their buying potential has been underexploited. Minister for Aged Services Ron Dyer wants to change that.
There may be a perception that exists in the community that older people do not spend a lot of money. However, that's a wrong perception. Older people do have spending power. There are more of them around.
The first step is improving the seniors card system. Regional directories have now been released which allow card holders to know what businesses in their area will provide discounts. One of Senior Australia's biggest role models, Hazel Hawke, says businesses haven't cottoned on to the fact that they've been ignoring the fastest growing sector of the community.
I think they haven't really got onto it early enough and smartly enough, but it's happening now and I think it's on a roll.
The regional directories will be mailed out to every card holder. In the local region, that totals 350,000. Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
The Youth Suicide Prevention Initiative is designed to explore the best ways of caring for young people, particularly those experiencing mental illness and drug and alcohol problems. It's an area that health workers say urgently needs attention.
We've been trying to engage young people into adult mental health services for years now, and it's quite clear by the Burdekin report and various other documents that it doesn't work.
Youth suicide is a growing national problem. Here at the Central Coast, 22 people have taken their lives since January. And with its high urban and rural population, the coast is an ideal location for the study. Research has shown that young mentally ill people are most at risk of suicide. With more than $300,000 in funding, the pilot program will concentrate on intensive home-based assessment with a focus on early intervention. For the next 2 years, health workers will refine the program, which may then be adopted throughout Australia.
This is a really exciting opportunity for the Central Coast to be part of something that will have some national significance down the track.
Sarah Griffiths, NBN News. It was in this Kings Road house at Tyes Hill that 24-year-old Stephen Kennedy was stabbed to death in September last year. The Crown claims 31-year-old Moses too killed Kennedy when Kennedy came to help Sharon Davis. The jury was told that Sharon Davis is the Crown's most important witness. However, because of a medical condition, she won't be appearing in Newcastle Court. Instead, the extraordinary step has been taken of videotaping her evidence, which will be shown to the jury during the week. Miss Davis, shown here in September last year, is expected to tell the court how Moses too pushed her against a wall, placed a knife at her throat and told her he wanted to have intercourse with her. The Crown claims that when Stephen Kennedy came to her aid, a struggle occurred between him and Moses too. Mr Kennedy staggered out into the yard and collapsed with a stab wound to his heart. There were apparently several people in the house at the time. All had been drinking and watching parts of the video once were warriors. The trial continues tomorrow.
Damon and Gabriel McCabe first won a tender to run the restored Customs House in 1994. Now, after several delays over licence arrangements and 5 months' hard work, they've transformed it into a restaurant, bar and function centre. Built in the late 1800s, the impressive building has long been a part of Newcastle's skyline. The McCabes have made an effort to incorporate its colourful history.
Throughout we have prints that remember Customs House with regards to its maritime history in Newcastle, and there's a display that Customs have erected that explains a few things that they've confiscated in the few years that they were here.
Customs Hall, the main upstairs function area, seats up to 200 people, while other rooms will cater for smaller groups and conferences. A piano cocktail bar will also operate upstairs, complementing the downstairs bar and cafe. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
A thousand of the old coin crunchers will be back in action in a little over a week. Their reintroduction follows what Council considers a failed trial of free city parking, city workers grabbing all the good spots before shoppers had a chance to park. But as well as the meters, 500 new free parking spaces have been set aside in the city. New signs identify quarter, half and 1 hour parking zones.
They're going to be the most convenient parking spots within the CBD.
In the first year of operation, the meters are expected to bring in $500,000 for the council. Most of that money will be spent on refurbishing other council car parks in the city. Meanwhile, as part of the city's overall transport plan, Council, State Transit and the Transport Union are close to agreeing on an alternative site for the Parnell Place bus terminus.
There's another option that's come to light over the past week or so. That's being examined seriously by both the buses and by Council, and we're hopeful of having something to report in the next week or so.
At 120 in the world, Rachel McQuillan has missed automatic entry to the US Open by just a couple of places. For the first time in 5 years, the 24-year-old from Newcastle will have to win 3 matches at a qualifying tournament to make this year's action at Flushing Meadows.
And I can't remember the last time I had to qualify for the US Open, but you know, this is the sort of thing that brings me back to tours, and it'll make me a tougher player getting through that, and you know, I'm looking to have a really good year next year.
McQuillan leaves for the States at the end of the week. First, she plays a $25,000 tournament in New York.
You know, I'm playing really well and I'm looking forward to it, and I've had a lot of tennis in the last 13 weeks, so yeah, I think I'll do really well.
The last 14 weeks have perhaps been the most demanding in her career. After the German and French Opens was Wimbledon, the Federation Cup and of course most recently the Olympics.
Great experience, yeah. I've been to Barcelona before, so I'm an old hand at this, yeah.
But something she's not used to will follow the Open, team tennis in America.
Lets off serves if they go in, and we play killer points at deuce, so and the crowd can yell and scream whenever they want, so it's going to be interesting to see how I cope with that.
Jonathan Upton, NBN News.